The moment my phone screen lit up, I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass in my hand, admiring the roses blooming in full splendor in the courtyard. The sender's label read Samuel, my husband, and the location showed St. Ives, Cornwall. A single line of text, like an ice pick, stabbed straight into my eyes. I've run away with your sister, Chloe. We're never coming back. I stared at the screen in silence for a full half-minute. I didn't break down in tears, didn't erupt in hysterical questioning. My fingertips tapped out a calm forward reply, "Good luck to you." The moment I hit send, I dialed the bank's customer service line and froze every joint bank account and credit card in our names. Then I called a locksmith and demanded that all the locks on the villa and the garage code be changed that same day. The warmth that had sustained this marriage shattered into nothing the instant that text arrived. Chloe was my little sister, whom I had cherished since childhood. I had paid for her university education, looked after her in every way. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine she would betray me like this. The thought of the two of them holed up in that seaside holiday cottage in St. Ives, carefree and happy, sent a chill through my chest that I could hardly put into words. I had thought that cutting off their money supply and blocking their way home would be the end of this farce. But I never imagined that Samuel's schemes went far beyond mere elopement. As dusk slowly fell, I composed myself and set about sorting through their personal belongings left in the house, preparing for the divorce proceedings that would follow. Just as I bent down to open the storage cabinet in the study, a sudden, heavy pounding came at the front door. My heart tightened. Through the video doorbell, I saw the two figures outside, and my blood ran cold. Standing there were not the two who had run away, but two uniformed police officers. I took a deep breath and slowly pulled the door open. The officer produced his identification, looked at me with a grave expression, and spoke words that shattered whatever composure I had left. "Madam, we need to verify some significant information regarding your husband, Samuel." Outside the floor-to-ceiling window, the roses burned in a blur of red in the twilight. My fingers gripping the door handle were pale at the knuckles. The two officers' gazes swept past me, scanning the bright living room behind me, as if confirming whether any danger lurked inside. "Please come in." I stepped aside, my voice surprisingly steady. The older officer stepped inside. His leather shoes made a restrained sound on the marble floor. The younger one lingered in the entrance, his eyes rapidly taking in the shoe cabinet and coat rack in the foyer. The living room still held the faint scent of the morning's incense. Samuel's usual cedarwood-scented candle had solidified in a corner of the coffee table, its wax pooling into a small, milky white mound. "Mr. Samuel Walker is your legal spouse." The older officer sat on the edge of the sofa and opened a black folder. "Yes." I poured him a glass of water. The glass bottom clinked lightly against the tabletop. "He left 3 days ago with my sister Chloe, saying they were going on holiday to Cornwall." The officer looked up. His irises were a pale gray blue, like two pieces of frosted glass in the indoor light. "Madam, the information we have may differ from your understanding. Early yesterday morning, Cornwall police discovered a male body on a beach near St. Ives. Preliminary identification suggests the deceased is your husband, Samuel Walker." My hand holding the water glass froze. Droplets of condensation slid down the side and soaked into the fabric at my knee. "Time of death is estimated between 48 and 72 hours. The officer continued, his voice sounding as though filtered through water. "The cause of death is pending autopsy, but the scene investigation suggests possible homicide. We are currently seeking clues about Mr. Walker's recent whereabouts. He sent me a text yesterday afternoon. I heard my own voice coming from far away, saying he'd run away with Chloe." The two officers exchanged a glance. The younger one stepped closer from the doorway, holding a transparent evidence bag containing Samuel's dark blue phone. "Madam, this phone was found this morning in a rubbish bin in St. Ives town center. According to our technical unit's initial analysis, the text was sent at 3:12 p.m. yesterday, but the signal source was not in Cornwall." "Where was it?" "Birmingham." I slowly sat down on the single sofa. My knees suddenly felt weak, as if someone had pulled the bones out. The scent of roses from the courtyard seeped through the window crack, cloyingly sweet. "I need you to tell me," I said, my voice beginning to tremble. "Who sent that text?" The officer didn't answer directly. He pulled a photograph from the folder. It showed the bay at St. Ives, famous for its golden sand, with blue and white tape cordoning off the rocky area and figures in white protective suits crouching in the shallows. When the body was found, the deceased was face down, with all personal items missing, but on his right wrist was this watch. The second photograph was a close-up. A Patek Philippe dial gleamed coldly in the sunlight, the strap dark brown crocodile leather, with a diagonal crack across the crystal. I recognized that watch. I had given it to Samuel for his 40th birthday last year, and the case back was engraved with our wedding anniversary. There are blood spatter patterns on the inner side of the strap, the officer said softly, preliminarily suggesting he raised his hand to block a blunt force blow while still alive. Madam, when was the last time you saw Mr. Walker? I thought for a moment. 3 mornings ago. He had been in the kitchen in a gray cashmere jumper, making coffee, and asked if I wanted to go to Bath for the weekend. I had a video conference that day and said no. He came over with his coffee cup, kissed my forehead, and said he would go out on his own. That's all, the officer pressed. He said he was going to Cornwall for a drive, on his own. I suddenly recalled. He took the dark green Land Rover. The younger officer immediately noted it on his tablet. We're also looking for that vehicle. So far it hasn't been found in Cornwall. Do you have any location tracking for it? The car has a built-in navigation system, but Samuel never turned on real-time location sharing. I walked to the study and opened the third drawer on the right side of Samuel's desk. He kept all his car keys, spare keys, and membership cards there. The drawer was completely empty except for a black USB drive lying alone on the velvet lining. My hand paused at the edge of the drawer. Samuel had an obsessive habit of organization. Every item had to be in its fixed place. This drawer should have held 3 car keys, 2 sets of spare access cards, and a small silver toolbox. Now they were all gone, leaving only a USB drive I had never seen before. May I see this? I handed the USB to the officer. The older officer took it and examined it against the light. The drive had no markings at all, a plain black plastic model. He nodded. We'll take it as evidence for technical analysis. Also, you mentioned your sister Chloe left with your husband. Has she contacted you recently? No, I shook my head. The text said they went together, but I haven't been able to reach her for 2 days. The officers exchanged another look. That subtle understanding made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Madam, we also visited Miss Chloe Chen's flat this morning, the younger officer said. The door lock was intact. No signs of a struggle inside, but her phone, passport, and everyday backpack are missing. Neighbors said they saw her leave 3 days ago in the afternoon with a suitcase, saying she was going to the airport. The airport? I frowned. Weren't they driving to Cornwall? That's exactly what we find puzzling, the older officer said, closing the folder. Mr. Walker's car is still missing, and Miss Chen's movements lack any direct evidence pointing to Cornwall. And the text claiming they eloped originated in Birmingham. The timelines of these 3 things contradict each other. He paused for a moment, as if weighing his words. Madam, the information we have at present is not enough to determine any direction. But for your safety, we suggest you do not stay alone for the next few days. Is there any friend or relative you could stay with? I shook my head. My parents had moved to Spain last year to retire, and I hadn't reached them by phone yet. Most of my friends were from Samuel's business circle, and at a time like this, I wasn't sure whom to trust. Then we'll arrange for the local police to increase night patrols, the officer said, rising. If you recall anything unusual, please contact us anytime. Also, he handed me a card. This is the detective in charge of the case. You can reach him directly with any new leads. I saw them to the door. The twilight had fully set in. The streetlights were not yet on, and the roses in the courtyard had become indistinct dark clusters. The younger officer turned back to glance at me as he walked to the driveway. That appraising look made me uncomfortable, as if he were looking through me at someone else. After closing the door, I leaned against the foyer wall for a long time. The living room was so quiet I could hear the second hand of the wall clock ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock, like some sort of countdown. Samuel's face rose in my mind. The slight crinkle at the corners of his eyes when he made coffee in the morning, the warmth of his lips on my forehead. I reached up and touched my own forehead. The skin was cold. If he really was dead, who sent the text? Using his phone, imitating his tone, pinpointing St. Ives, Cornwall with such precision. If he wasn't dead, then whose body lay on that beach in St. Ives? That Patek Philippe was one I had chosen myself. The tiny scratch on the case back had come from a skiing accident in Switzerland last year, unique and unmistakable. I returned to the study and sat down in Samuel's chair. The leather still held the faint scent of a cedarwood cologne, and there was a small worn patch on the armrest where he had unconsciously scratched it with his fingernail while thinking. I opened the drawer he used most often, files neatly stacked, property deeds, insurance policies, trust documents. I pulled them out one by one and flipped through them, the paper edges sharp as blades against my fingers. At the very bottom lay a blue-covered folder, face down. I pulled it out and opened it. It contained Samuel's company financial statements for the last 3 months. He ran a medium-sized import-export trading firm, specializing in premium wines and spirits, and business had been fairly stable over the years. But as I scanned down line by line, my eye stopped at the column for special expenditure. For 3 consecutive months, a sum of £50,000 had been paid to the same account each month, with only the note consultancy fee in the remarks. The recipient was a company I had never heard of, named Tide Consultancy Limited. I turned further and found a copy of a bank transfer voucher tucked behind, the recipient account matching the earlier one, dated the day before he had left for Cornwall. I pulled that voucher out and examined it under the desk lamp. Tide Consultancy's registered address was an office building in the City of London. I took out my phone and looked up the company's registration information. The legal representative was a name I had never heard of, but the registration date sent a chill down my spine. Exactly 3 years ago, the second month after Samuel and I married. The landline beside me suddenly rang. I started, instinctively picked it up, and heard Chloe's voice from the earpiece. "Elder sister." She addressed me in a tone I couldn't read, with the faint sound of waves in the background. "Chloe, where are you?" I gripped the receiver, my knuckles white. "I'm somewhere you can't find me." She laughed. That laugh was so familiar. It was the same tone she'd used as a child when she got caught stealing cake from the fridge. "Samuel asked me to tell you. Stop looking for us." "Samuel!" I stared at the transfer voucher in front of me, its edges curling slightly under the desk lamp. "Chloe, listen to me. The police came by just now and they said..." "Elder sister." She cut me off. "You've always been like this. You have to look into everything and get to the bottom of it. But some things, not knowing is actually happier." A burst of static came through the receiver, as if wind had blown into the microphone. Then Chloe's voice became distant, as if she were speaking to someone beside her. "She wants to talk to you." The line went dead. The dialed tone filled the study, and the palm holding the receiver was slick with sweat. Outside, something flashed past. Headlights. A white car crept slowly along the driveway in front of the house, didn't stop, and disappeared around the corner. I put down the receiver, my fingers trembling too much to press the keys properly. I called the bank's automated service, gave Samuel and Chloe's shared supplementary card number, and requested the spending records for the last 3 days. The customer service rep said verification was needed, so I gave Samuel's date of birth, the last 4 digits of his national insurance number, and his mother's maiden name. "Found it," the rep said in a sweet voice. "The most recent transaction on the supplementary card was yesterday afternoon at a hotel near Birmingham New Street Station. Amount, £89. The signatory was Chloe Chun. Again Birmingham." I hung up and stared blankly at the computer screen. The desktop wallpaper was a group photo from our trip to Tuscany last year, Samuel with his arm around me, Chloe holding up the camera in front, grinning from ear to ear. We had been at a small hillside winery for lunch that day. The tablecloths were red and white checkered. The wine was cheap but delicious. Samuel had had too much to drink and tried to chat up the landlady in broken Italian. He only knew how to say hello, thank you, and 3 dishes. I closed the desktop and opened Samuel's computer. I knew his password well. Our wedding date reversed. The desktop files were as neat as a model home. A few work folders, a photo folder, and 2 hidden file icons I had never seen before. I clicked to show hidden items. One labeled Tide appeared. Inside were only 2 files. One was an encrypted Excel spreadsheet. I tried several possible passwords, but none worked. The other was a Word document that opened to a single line. "If you ever see this, it means I'm gone. Go find Harry Chun, he knows everything." I stared at the name Harry Chun for several seconds. He had been Chloe's university roommate, a computer science guy, and we'd lost touch after graduation. How did Samuel know him? And why leave such a message? I picked up the phone and searched my contacts for Harry Chun's number. When I found it, I realized I had never stored it. Just as I was about to give up, I remembered Chloe's old university email account. The electronic receipts I had kept for paying her tuition should have the emergency contact number on file. I searched for a while before finding that PDF in an old folder. The emergency contact column read, Harry Chun, with a UK mobile number. I dialed. It rang 7 times and went to voicemail. A young male voice in English asked me to leave my name and message, ordinary, with no distinguishing features. Harry, this is Chloe's elder sister. I have an urgent matter regarding Samuel and Tide Consultancy. Please call me back. I left my number, hung up, and sent a text repeating the same request. While waiting for a reply, I paced restlessly. I went to the kitchen and downed a glass of cold water. The rim clinked against my teeth, startling me with its chill. Outside, that same white car passed again, slower this time, almost gliding. I put the glass down and went to the window. The car was already gone, its tail lights a standard halogen yellow, revealing nothing special. I drew the curtains, went back to the study, and photographed every page of that blue folder with my phone. Transfer vouchers, company registration details, and several series of numbers scribbled in Samuel's notebook. I didn't know what they meant, but I kept them. Then I put the folder back exactly at the bottom of the drawer, making sure everything was in its original position. My phone buzzed, a text from Harry Chun, just one line. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., South Gate of Regent's Park. Come alone. I replied okay. When I called back, it was already switched off. I didn't sleep much that night. I tossed and turned. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw that cracked Patek Philippe dial on the St. Ives beach. Around 2 a.m. I got up to use the bathroom and noticed the study door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had closed it before bed. I pushed it open. Everything looked normal, except Samuel's chair had turned to face the window. I stood in the doorway and stared for a long time. On the outward-facing side of the armrest, there was a fresh nail scratch, a pale white gouge. I reached out and touched it. I could feel the slight raised burr under my fingertip. That mark hadn't been there when I sat in that chair before dinner. I backed out of the study, shut the door tightly, and locked it. Back in the bedroom, I emptied the bedside drawer, found the small key I used to open the safe, and clutched it in my palm as I sat against the headboard all night. Early the next morning, I left the house. After walking about 10 minutes along the driveway, I spotted a small dark green plastic fragment wedged in the drain grate by the roadside. I crouched down and picked it up. It looked like the edge of a sidestep, and the color was identical to Samuel's Land Rover. In the drain there were also several tire tracks of varying depths, with signs of repeated compaction in the mud. I took photos with my phone and wrapped the fragment in a tissue, putting it in my pocket. On the way to Regent's Park, I repeatedly checked that no one was following me. I took the tube, switched to a bus, and looped around Soho before heading north. At 2:55 p.m., I stood beneath the old plane tree at the south gate of Regent's Park. Spring leaves had not yet fully unfurled. The branches were hung with pale green dappled shadows. At exactly 3 p.m., a young man in a dark gray hoodie approached from the direction of the rose garden, his hood low. When he came closer, I recognized the face, thinner than in university, prominent cheekbones, dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept for days. Miss Chun. He stopped 2 paces away and didn't come closer. The fact that you're here means you've already seen that file. Samuel wrote that you know everything, I said, staring at him. What is Tide Consultancy? Where did the £50,000 Samuel sent each month go? And where is he now? Harry Chun pulled an old phone from his pocket, showed me a bank statement screenshot for a few seconds, then quickly put it away. On the screen was a transfer record. The recipient was indeed Tide Consultancy, but the sending account was not Samuel's company account, but a corporate account labeled St. Ives Property Development. The amount was £50,000, but the note read Project Preliminary Survey Fee. Samuel started working with me on a project 3 years ago, Harry said, his voice low and fast. He asked me to build an encrypted cross-border payment channel. On the surface it looked like wine tray transactions, but it actually split funds into several different accounts. Tide Consultancy was a shell company with a fictitious legal representative. The real controlled accounts are overseas. Why would he do something like that? My head was buzzing. His business was running fine. He wasn't short of money. It wasn't money he lacked. Harry looked at me with an expression that made my blood run cold. It was freedom. Miss Chen, your husband's marriage to you was conditional from the very beginning. You're wondering why he set up Tide the second month after you married? Because that day he received his first anonymous letter, threatening that if he didn't deposit money regularly into that account, your parents' address in Spain would be made public. It was an anonymous letter. I've been tracing it for 2 years. Harry pocketed his phone. The IP went through multiple layers of hopping, but one of the nodes pointed to a private server in St. Ives. I traced the server's registrant. It was Chloe's university email address. The wind blew across the lawn, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. I stood there, feeling as though I had been taken apart and put back together, but in the wrong order. Chloe and Samuel called me yesterday, I said. She said they were together. That call wasn't from Chloe. Harry pulled another item from his pocket, a small voice recorder. I intercepted an audio clip yesterday. Listen. He pressed play. It was my own voice from last night's phone call. I picked up the landline, spoke. Then Chloe's voice and the sound of waves. Then the line. She wants to talk to you. And a hang-up. That was it. What's wrong with it? I asked. The problem, Harry said, handing me the recorder, is that the 15 seconds before you picked up, the phone hadn't even connected. That wave's sound and Chloe's voice were played from a separate device, synchronized with your call. She wasn't at that location at all. I gripped the recorder, the metal casing dug painfully into my palm. Then who called me? I don't know. Harry shook his head. But I can tell you something else. On the day Samuel left for Cornwall, he came to me first and left an encrypted laptop in my care. He said if he hadn't contacted me within 5 days, I was to make everything on it public. Yesterday was day 4. What's on the laptop? A complete fund flow map. Over a dozen branches from Tide Consultancy, converging into 4 offshore accounts. Plus a set of photographs. Records of Chloe meeting different people at that St. Ives holiday cottage over the past 3 years. What your sister has been doing is far more complicated than just running away. I looked down at the recorder in my hand. Sunlight filtered through the plain leaves and danced across its silver casing. In the distance, children were flying kites on the lawn. Their laughter was torn into fragments by the wind. Come with me, Harry said suddenly. I'll show you something. He turned and walked deeper into the park. After a moment's hesitation, I followed. Passing through the rose garden, the spring blooms were not yet at their peak. The buds were tightly clenched like fists holding secrets. Harry walked quickly, skirting the artificial lake and cutting through a path to the north exit. I hurried after him, my heart pounding so hard my chest ached. Outside the north gate was a gray Fiat, very old, with a crack in the rear bumper. Harry opened the passenger door and gestured for me to get in. He took the driver's seat and started the engine. The car wound westward along the tree-lined avenue, passing rows of Georgian townhouses. When Samuel came to me 3 years ago, he said he was in trouble, Harry said as he drove, his eyes fixed ahead. Someone had records of a gray market deal he'd done before he met you and was blackmailing him into monthly payments. He didn't dare call the police or hire a lawyer because the blackmailer said that if any third party got involved, those records would be sent to your family. What gray market deal? A private arrangement with a Spanish winery. In short, he helped launder a batch of dubious wine into legitimate channels and took a £300,000 commission. It happened before you knew him, but if it came out, his business license would be revoked, and it would affect your father's residency status over there. I closed my eyes. Samuel had never mentioned any of this to me. He was always the man who made coffee in the kitchen when I woke up, the one who hummed off-key tunes while pruning the roses in the courtyard. So I helped him build that payment channel, Harry continued. On the surface, it looked like consultancy fees to Tide, but in reality the funds were split and diverted. Part went to the blackmailer's pockets, part was parked in the St. Ives account. He kept a backup. All the money he transferred was recorded in an encrypted ledger, thinking that one day he could use it to trace the source. Then why didn't he stop? I asked. 50,000 a month, 3 years. That's nearly 2 million. What kind of blackmail lasts that long? Harry stopped at a red light and turned to me. Because from the very beginning, he never knew who the blackmailer was. That person never showed their face. All instructions were sent via encrypted emails to an old, abandoned email address of Samuel's. He tried every way to trace them, but always hit a dead end. Until he discovered that the St. Ives account's associated information contained Chloe's name. So he went to Cornwall to find her. He went to confirm. Harry pressed the accelerator, and the car turned into a narrow alley. To confirm whether Chloe was helping someone else do this, or whether she was the blackmailer herself. Before he left, he told me that if he didn't come back in 5 days, I should give the laptop's contents to the police. But what he didn't anticipate was that the elopement text would appear on day 3. The car pulled up outside an abandoned warehouse. The iron gate bore a no entry sign, the hinges rusted red. Harry got out and unlocked a side door with a key. Inside were stacked cardboard boxes and old furniture covered in dust. He moved 2 boxes aside to reveal a steel security door behind them, completely out of place with its surroundings, with a fingerprint lock glowing blue. He pressed his thumb to it, and the door opened. Inside was a space of less than 10 square meters, set up like a miniature command center. 3 monitors, a server rack, and walls covered with intricate relationship charts and photographs. I immediately recognized the central photo, Samuel and Chloe in front of that St. Ives holiday cottage, the timestamp showing 3 summers ago. It was the holiday cottage I had rented for the whole family, the one we'd all stayed in. In the photo, Samuel wore beach shorts and sunglasses. Chloe gave a peace sign and grinned, with the deep blue sea and white rooftop in the background. The photo had been circled in red, with a small annotation beside it. First point of contact. Did you compile all of this yourself? I asked. Harry nodded. Chloe's first contact with a local St. Ives estate agent was that summer. After the rest of you left, she stayed an extra 3 days and signed a long-term lease extension in your name. That cottage has been actually leased by her ever since, continuously renewed for 3 years. I stared at my sister's smiling face in the photo. My throat felt choked with cotton. She rented it in my name. Then what? Then that house became a transit point. Harry walked to the monitor and pulled up a series of satellite images. Over the past 3 years, every 2 or 3 months, cash would flow from various channels into a local temporary account, then over a few days be paid out in installments under names like rent, maintenance, service fees. The amounts weren't large, £3,000 to £8,000 each, but they were very regular. Samuel's investigation pointed to a conclusion. Someone was using that house as a meeting point for handovers, and all the physical evidence related to that gray market deal was routed through that cottage. Evidence! I seized on the word. What kind of evidence? Harry brought up another document, a scanned copy, handwritten receipts and signatures. I leaned in and read the contents, and my entire body felt as though I had been immersed in ice water. It was a handwritten memo listing batches of wine by number, storage dates, and signatory names for handover. On one shipment, the signatory column bore my name. The handwriting was almost identical to mine. Only the slight pressure and rhythm of the strokes revealed it was imitation. Chloe changed one detail when she forged your signature, Harry said, zooming in on part of the scan. When you write the character Chun, the vertical stroke of the right radical curves outward at the bottom. Hers is straight. After Samuel discovered this, he cross-checked all documents containing your signature. There were 17 delivery notes signed with your name. I stepped back, my back hitting the edge of a server rack. The cold metal seeped through my clothes. 17 delivery notes with my forged signature. 3 years. £50,000 per month in blackmail payments. The seaside cottage in St. Ives. And my sister whom I had always fussed over. Did Samuel ever tell you? I heard my own voice, dry and strained. How far he had gotten in his investigation? Harry was silent for a moment. The last message he sent me was at dawn 3 days ago. He said he had arrived in St. Ives and was on his way to the cottage. Then he said one more thing. After that, I never heard from him again. What? He said, I've finally figured out everything about your sister. Something rattled in the warehouse above, wind blowing through a broken skylight, tumbling fragments of glass across the concrete floor. I stood in front of the monitors, staring at the dense timelines and transfer records on screen, and suddenly felt that the home I had so carefully managed for 3 years, the marriage that began each morning with coffee and a kiss on the forehead, had all been someone else's script. I need you to do one thing for me now, I said, turning to Harry. Can you extract the fund flow map from that encrypted computer and send it to me? Plus all the signed documents with my name. I want original photos. What are you going to do? Go to the police, I said. Not by calling. I'm going straight to Cornwall Constabulary, St. Ives jurisdiction. Since all the leads point to that house, let's start digging from there. Harry stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. He reached behind the server rack and pulled out a silver external hard drive and handed it to me. Everything is on here. The encryption password is your birth date plus rose. Samuel said you loved that rose bush in the courtyard. My hand trembled as I took the drive. The metal surface still held the residual warmth of a server room, as if Samuel had just held it. It was evening by the time I left the warehouse. Harry drove me to the nearest tube station, and as I got out, he slipped the voice recorder into my pocket. Keep it. Might be useful. I got on the tube, chose a corner seat, and tucked the hard drive and recorder into the most hidden compartment of my bag. Across the carriage, a young girl in headphones was watching a variety show on her phone, laughing happily. I looked at her smiling eyes and inexplicably thought of Chloe. After arriving at my stop, I hailed a taxi straight to St. Pancras Station and bought the first available overnight train ticket to Cornwall. In the waiting hall, bustling with people, I sat on a bench and went through all the saved materials on my phone, over and over, until my eyes ached and I could barely keep them open. As the train departed, the city's twinkling lights slid past the window, gradually thinning into scattered points, then into utter darkness. I leaned back in my seat, pressing the hard drive against my chest, feeling its tiny weight through the fabric. At just past 3 a.m, the train arrived at a small station near St. Ives. The platform was deserted, with only a dim yellow lamp swaying in the wind. I trudged out of the station. Sea air rushed in from somewhere, salty and cold, carrying a heavy briny smell. The town was still asleep. I followed the slope downhill towards the coast, following my memory of the holiday cottage's location. The streetlights stretched and shattered my shadow on the uneven flagstones. After the second turn, I saw the white house in the distance, 3 stories, facing the bay, its windows dark and unlit. I didn't rush over. I crouched behind a low wall across the street and watched for a while, confirming no one was moving around. Then I hugged the wall and circled to the back of the house. Beyond the lawn, a flight of stone steps led down to a small beach. The back door was ajar. A thread of extremely faint warm light seeped through the gap. I pushed the door open. The hinge creaked very softly, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of the tide. In the living room, a floor lamp was indeed lit, its shade tilted so the light fell only on one corner of the sofa. Someone sat there, facing away from the door, the outline of her shoulder blades shifting slightly beneath a thin sweater. "Chloe," I called out. The person slowly turned around. It wasn't Chloe. It was an unfamiliar face, a middle-aged woman with short hair and deep wrinkles around her eyes. She didn't look surprised to see me. Instead, she raised a hand and pointed to the coffee table. On it lay a mobile phone, its screen lit up with an ongoing call. The caller ID read Samuel. I froze. The woman spoke, her English tinged with some regional accent. "Sit down and wait. He said he'll be here soon." "Who are you?" I gripped my bag strap, my fingers digging into the canvas. "Someone who's been waiting a long time." She pushed the phone towards me. "You'll find out when you take the call." I stared at the phone. The call duration was still ticking, already 47 minutes. I walked over slowly, bent down, and picked it up, pressing it to my ear. The earpiece was silent for a moment, then came the sound of footsteps, a dull, wooden floor sort of tread. "Miss Chen." A man's voice. Not Samuel, younger, with a thinner timbre, carrying an unnatural hint of amusement. "You're smarter than your sister. You got here a full day earlier than she anticipated." "Where is Samuel?" I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "He's fine. Actually, he's better than he's been in a long time." The voice paused briefly as if choosing its words. "Your sister is here too. Do you want to speak to them?" Before I could answer, a woman's scream came through the receiver, quickly muffled into a dull whimper. I recognized it. That was Chloe's voice. "You see," the young man's voice came again. "I wasn't lying. They're both here. But you have to answer one question first. That hard drive you're carrying, It has Samuel's ledger on it, doesn't it?" I didn't speak. The woman in the living room slowly stood up. She was tall, broad-shouldered. She took a step closer, the floor lamp's light cast upwards, deepening the wrinkles on her face into sharp ravines. "Don't be nervous." The man on the phone laughed again. "Let's make a deal. Leave the hard drive with us, and I'll let you see Samuel. He's been waiting for you to come looking for him. You know he loves you the most." The tide crashed against the rocks outside the window with a thunderous roar. I held the phone, my peripheral vision scanning the living room layout. Stairs to the second floor on the left front, the back door 3 steps behind me, all windows locked. The woman's shadow on the floor was stretching longer and longer, nearly touching my toes. "How do I know I can trust you?" I asked. There was a few seconds of silence on the line. Then a voice came through, very soft, as if from very far away. "Roses." Samuel's voice, hoarse, fragmented, but unmistakably his. "The ones in the courtyard. The ones you love. The pink ones." The call cut off. The screen went dark, the call duration freezing at 52 minutes. I slowly placed the phone back on the coffee table. The woman across from me twitched the corner of her mouth into something between a smile and a warning. "Come on," she said. "He's waiting upstairs." The light filtering down from the stairwell flickered on and off, like some kind of breathing rhythm. I touched the switch of the voice recorder in my bag to confirm it was recording. Then I lifted my foot and took the first step onto the stairs. At the corner of the staircase, a watercolor painting hung on the wall. St. Ives Harbor in morning mist, rough brushwork, the signature scratched away with a fingernail. My steps on the wooden stairs gave a dull creak with each one, as if the house were counting its visitors in its own language. At the end of the second-floor corridor, a wall lamp cast a swaying yellow shadow. The short-haired woman followed 3 paces behind me, neither urging nor speaking, her presence only betrayed by the soft scuff of her flat shoes on the carpet. There were 4 doors along the corridor, 3 closed, 1 ajar. The ajar one let out the brightest light and a faint murmur of voices. I stopped in front of the door. Through the gap I could see a small patch of floor, a gray-blue carpet with a woman's sandal line on it, its strap studded with plastic rhinestones. I recognized that shoe. Chloe had worn it last summer when she posed by my swimming pool and posted photos on social media. I pushed the door open. The room was spacious, with a large window facing the sea wide open. White gauze curtains swelled and fell in the breeze, like some creature breathing repeatedly. By the window stood a double bed with rumpled sheets and 1 pillow on the floor. Against the wall, in a chair, sat a man with his wrists bound to the armrests by plastic zip ties and a gray cloth stuffed in his mouth. It was Samuel. When he saw me, his pupils contracted sharply. His whole face seemed to tighten like a wound spring, veins bulging at his temples. The cloth in his mouth prevented him from forming proper syllables. Only muffled groans emerged from deep in his throat, the cords of his neck standing out one by one. "Easy," a voice came from behind the curtain. I turned towards the sound. By the window stood a young man in a black shirt, lean-built, with neatly trimmed short hair. His features were unremarkable, but carried a kind of sharpness that made one uneasy. He was twirling a phone in his hand, the same one I had answered earlier, now locked. "When you came up, I wasn't going to let you see him so soon," he said, tucking the phone into his pocket and tilting his chin toward Samuel. "But you're more cooperative than I expected. That's a pleasant surprise." "Who are you?" I asked. Behind me, the short-haired woman had silently taken up position by the doorframe, arms crossed. "You can call me Leo." He smiled, the curve of his mouth looking somewhat twisted in the lamplight. "Samuel has worked with me for 3 years. He never mentioned me, did he? Typical. Apart from drinking coffee with you and pottering in the garden, he never let a real word slip out." Samuel struggled in the chair. The zip ties bit into his skin, and soon a purplish-red ring appeared around his wrists. His eyes were fixed on me, filled with anxiety and something like desperate warning, as if urging me to turn around and leave. "He didn't mention you," I said, looking at Leo. "But he left a complete backup. 3 years, £50,000 a month, sent to Tide Consultancy, then split and transferred, ending up here in St. Ives. You thought he left no evidence?" Leo's smile faltered for a moment. He glanced at Samuel, then back at me. "Your friend Harry is quick. But we both know that ledger is only encrypted, without the key. It's just gibberish. Since you're here, you must have the drive. Hand it over, and I'll let you both go. Let us go. I glanced at the woman in the doorway. How do I know you'll keep your word? Leo picked up something from the windowsill and tossed it over. It landed on the carpet at my feet. It was a black leather card holder. Inside were 2 passports, Samuel's and Chloe's. Beneath Chloe's photo was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and read a hand-scrawled message, the letters crooked as if scratched out with a fingernail. Sis, don't believe a word he says. Your sister tried to climb out the back window 2 nights ago and fell, Leo said. His tone is flat, as if he were reporting the weather. Her leg's useless now, she's in the next room. If you cooperate, I'll have her brought up here, and the 3 of you can walk out of his house together. If not, he paused, pulling a silver USB drive from his pocket, identical to the one I had found in Samuel's drawer. To be honest, I don't even need your hard drive or USB. Samuel built me a clean money trail over 3 years. Every laundered payment left a backup in a local ledger. You think you've got everything? Naive. Samuel suddenly lurched in his chair, its legs scraping the floor with a piercing screech. He managed to push the cloth halfway out with his tongue and blurted out a muffled, "Don't give it, that's fake." Leo walked over and shoved the cloth back in with force, knocking Samuel's head against the back of the chair with a dull thud. My fingers tightened around the voice recorder in my bag, my thumb pressing the stop button. From the moment I entered, this device had recorded everything. You say that ledger is fake? I challenged Leo, holding his gaze. Then how long have you been in this house? 3 years. Longer. While Chloe was forging those delivery notes, Samuel was still depositing money monthly. You were already making a steady profit. Why stage a body on that beach in St. Ives? Leo's expression finally shifted noticeably. His lips tightened for an instant, and his eyelids narrowed. So you know about the body? The police came to my house, I said. They told me they'd found Samuel's remains on the beach. With the Patek Philippe, I gave him among his belongings. But Samuel is sitting right here in this chair, very much alive. So who was on that beach? The room fell quiet. Sea breeze gusted through the window. As the curtain billowed up, it briefly obscured Leo's face, and when it fell again, his expression had returned to that unsettling calm. Someone whose name you don't need to remember, he said. Your husband is quite capable. For 3 years, he laundered money for me while keeping his own escape routes open. He thought if he made the fund flow a closed loop, I'd have nothing on him. But he forgot one thing. His little sister has more guts than he does. Who was Chloe working for? Leo didn't answer. He made a gesture to the woman at the door. She turned and left, light and quick. A few seconds later, a muffled cry of pain came from next door, then the sound of something heavy being dragged. The door was pushed open again, and the short-haired woman half-carried, half-dragged someone inside and dropped her on the carpet. Chloe curled up on the carpet, her left ankle swollen and purple, trouser leg rolled up past her knee, the bruising extending from her ankle halfway up her shin. Her hair was disheveled. Her face bore white streaks from dried tears. When she saw me, her lips began to tremble violently, and tears flowed without warning. "Sis!" she called out, her voice sounding as if she had swallowed broken glass. I crouched down to look at her ankle. It was badly swollen, the skin shiny and turning a deep purple. Her fingers clutched my sleeve, her nails digging into the skin of my wrist with almost enough force to draw blood. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her lips close to my ear, her breath hot and urgent. That body was arranged by Samuel. I looked up. In Chloe's eyes I saw a kind of clarity I had never seen before, a sharpness forged from terror. She let go of my sleeve, quickly traced a few letters on the carpet with her finger, then wiped them away. WATCH. Watch. I stood up. Leo leaned against the window frame, watching our reunion with an air of idle amusement, the corner of his mouth carrying a detached ease. Outside, the sea glimmered faintly in the night. The rhythm of the waves was unhurried, like the house's own breathing. "Chloe says the body was arranged by Samuel," I said, looking at Leo. "Are you saying Samuel staged his own death with a substitute? Why? To escape your blackmail? Or something else?" Leo chuckled and turned his gaze to the sea outside. "Who arranged the body? I really don't know. But I do know one thing. After Samuel sent you that elopement text, he sat right here in this room and talked with me for 6 hours. He proposed a new deal. He would give me all the fund flow records he had in exchange for his freedom. I found it interesting, so I said I'd think about it for 2 days. And then the next morning, a body appeared on the beach. Leo turned back to me. Funny, isn't it? He sent that text, using your phone. He sent that text. My back pressed against the wall. Samuel sat in the chair, the cloth in his mouth now soaked, and his expression was complicated, anxious, but also carrying a kind of resigned stillness, as if he had foreseen this confrontation. You're saying Samuel orchestrated everything? I asked, including leading you to Cornwall. Leo lowered his voice, slightly. He told me himself last night. He said he knew his wife's personality too well. As soon as the text mentioned Chloe's name, you dig into it. And sure enough, you came, with all the ledger backups, with the USB he left in his drawer, all the way to this house. Why did he bring you here? Leo fell silent. He looked at Samuel, and the thing in that gaze made a chill run down my spine. Samuel met his eyes, his Adam's apple bobbing once, then slowly shook his head. Because he needed a witness, Leo finally said, his voice rough. 3 years of cash flow, forged delivery notes, forged signatures. Everything went through the channel he designed. The only way he could extract himself was to have a third-party witness, document, and preserve evidence at a critical moment. That person couldn't be the police, because he himself was complicit. That person couldn't be Harry. Harry only handled the technical side, not the scene. So it had to be you, his wife, Chloe's sister, the one person who was completely outside it all. I stood in the light from the window, feeling as though I were being peeled apart layer by layer. 3 years, $50,000 a month, 17 forged delivery notes, the unknown corpse on the beach at St. Ives, Chloe's purple-black swollen ankle, the purple ligature marks on Samuel's wrists. All the threads collided and crisscrossed in my mind, finally converging into a conclusion that chilled me to the bone. Whose body was it? I repeated the question, my voice calm as if it belonged to someone else. Leo and Samuel exchanged another look. Then Samuel pushed the cloth out of his mouth with all his strength, and it fell onto the carpet. His voice was hoarse, like sandpaper on iron, the real person behind Tide Consultancy's fictitious legal entity. After he helped me register that company 3 years ago, I kept him in a flat near St. Ives. I paid him, gave him cover, because he was the only living proof. Last month he raised his price to $500,000. I couldn't pay, so I put him on the beach early. The room fell silent, broken only by the wind and Chloe's stifled sobs. I looked at Samuel's face. That face I had woken up to every morning, that face that had said goodnight to me countless times by moonlight, was now split by the lamplight into light and shadow, one half still the familiar contours I knew, the other half a stranger I had never met. That text, I said slowly, you said you'd run away with Chloe. Chloe's ankle had been injured 3 days ago. She couldn't possibly have gone with you. You sent that text yourself, on your own phone, using Chloe as a decoy so I'd think it was a romantic betrayal and my investigation would be thrown off track. But in fact, you planned every step. You let me find the transfer records. You led me to Harry. You guided me all the way to Cornwall, to this house, to see you in person. What did you want me to do? Call the police? Or testify for you? Samuel closed his eyes. He didn't answer. Leo straightened from the window, walked over to Samuel, bent down, and snapped off the zip ties around his wrists. The sharp crack of plastic breaking echoed in the quiet room. Samuel rubbed his wrists. The purple marks were deeply imprinted, and slowly stood up, his knees seeming a little unsteady. He walked over to me, close enough that I could smell the mix of sea salt and sweat on his shirt. He raised a hand as if to touch my face. I turned my head away. His hand hung in the air for a moment, then slowly dropped. I could have said nothing, he said, his voice barely audible to the two of us. Let the police close the case with that body as me, take a new identity, start over somewhere else. But I wrestled with it for a month and couldn't do it. Couldn't do what? Couldn't let you think I was dead. His gaze rested on some point on the side of my neck, not meeting my eyes. Or let you think I'd run off with Chloe. Either way, you would have used that nature of yours to dig and dig. You're the most relentless person I've ever known, Chinyu. He used my Chinese name. He had used it only once before, on our wedding day, when he had practiced the pronunciation for a whole week and recorded it to play for me, laughing like a young man who had just passed his driving test. So you brought me here, just to tell me to my face that you're leaving. I gripped the recorder in my bag, my nails cutting into the canvas. Not leaving! Samuel finally met my eyes. Laying everything out in front of you, letting you decide what to do. 3 years, this money going in and out, the laundered accounts. Enough to put me away for a long time. That life too. I handled it, even if I wasn't the one who struck the blow. I arranged it. If you want the police to come, call them now. There's a landline in the next room. If you want me to go, after tonight you'll never see me again. Chloe let out a faint moan on the carpet. I saw her propping herself up on her elbows, trying to get up, but the pain in her ankle made her curl up like a shrimp and collapse back down. The short-haired woman stood motionless at the door, watching the standoff with a blank expression. Who injured Chloe? I asked suddenly. Samuel's lips moved. She jumped out the window herself. She tried to steal my phone to call the police, misjudged the drop from the back window. Then why was she tied up in the next room? Because Leo needed her as a hostage. Samuel's tone was flat. On the night I met Leo at the beach to negotiate, Chloe followed me. She tracked me all the way from London to St. Ives, saying she had leverage over me too. She'd stolen a backup from my company server, containing the original import records for those wine shipments. She was going to use it as a bargaining chip to make me agree to go with her. I looked down at Chloe, curled on the carpet, her forehead pressed into the fibers, her shoulders heaving. Whether in tears or laughter, I couldn't tell. So the person you originally planned to run away with, my voice finally began to tremble, wasn't her. It was yourself. A distant foghorn sounded from the sea, deep and long, like a ferry reporting its position as it approached harbor. The wall lamp flickered twice, dimmed and brightened again, and the figures in the room wavered for a moment in the shifting light. Samuel was silent for a long time. When the lamp flickered again, he spoke, his voice almost swallowed by the tide. I'm putting the choice in your hands. One word from you, I stay, and tomorrow morning I go to St. Ives police station to turn myself in. One word, and I walk out the back door tonight, and this house, these accounts, that body on the beach, none of it will ever touch you again. Whichever you choose, I will do it. Chloe's head jerked up. Her face was streaked with tears, but a near-manic light burned in her eyes. Sis, let him go. Let him go. Then hand the ledger to the police. All the evidence is in your hands, and if he's gone, he can never come back to mess things up again. Choose that. Sis, choose that. Shut up. Leo's voice cut in from the window, undisguised irritation. Your sister isn't like you. She knows what matters. When you stole that server backup, did you think you weren't in this too? You think you can walk away clean? I never planned to walk away clean. Chloe pushed herself upright, the hair on her forehead plastered to her skin with cold sweat, her eyes bloodshot. I didn't follow him into this house expecting to come out clean. But you, she pointed at Samuel, you dragged her into this, and what right do you have? 3 years you kept everything from her, and on the last day you push her to the front to choose for you. Does that make you worthy? Samuel didn't argue. He stood before me with his eyes downcast. The sea breeze came and went through the window, lifting his forelock and letting it fall again, revealing a few short gray hairs at his temples. I had never noticed those gray hairs before. I didn't know which night of these 3 years they had quietly appeared. I bent my head, took the silver recorder from my bag, and pressed stop. The screen showed a recording duration of 43 minutes. I held it out in my palm to Samuel. Listen to it yourself, I said. Then tell me what you think I should choose. Samuel took it. His fingers brushed my palm, cold as coffee left out overnight. He pressed play and held it to his ear. His own voice from earlier began to replay. In the lamplight, the color drained gradually from his face. The last warmth on his cheekbones vanished, and he seemed to have lost whatever backbone had been supporting him. The room was filled only with his own voice from the recorder, then silence, then the hissing of wind through the microphone. It was then that I remembered what Harry Chin had said in the warehouse. What your sister has been doing is far more complicated than just running away. Now I finally understood all the layers of that complicated. Forged signatures, stealing server backups, following Samuel to St. Ives, breaking her ankle and still trying to call the police. She had been fighting in ways I couldn't see, scrambling to mend fences, even though she had been the one who first tangled Samuel and Leo in the same mess. The recording ended with the last scrap of wind. Samuel switched it off, gripped it in his hand, his knuckles whitening against the silver casing. He raised his head and looked into my eyes. Inside him, something finally collapsed, like a sandcastle on the beach whose foundation had been hollowed out by the tide, scattering shapelessly at the next wave. "I choose to turn myself in," he said. Leo let out a soft snort from the window. Chloe covered her face. Tears seeped through her fingers. I stood where I was, watching him lower the recorder back into my palm, his fingertips lingering on my hand for an instant, then leaving completely. Suddenly, urgent footsteps came from outside the door. The short-haired woman sprang away from the doorframe, and a blinding torchlight shone straight down from the stairwell at the end of the corridor, followed by the rustle of uniforms and the clash of metal equipment. "Cornwall Police! Everyone stay where you are." I turned, squinting into the harsh beam. Behind the light, several silhouettes were moving. Boots struck the floor in a nearly mechanical rhythm. The lead officer stopped in the middle of the corridor, lowered the torch, and revealed a square-jawed face with gray-blue eyes. It was the older officer who had come to my house yesterday. He recognized me, too. His brow twitched almost imperceptibly. But his gaze quickly moved past me, landing on Leo by the window, then sweeping over Samuel beside the chair and Chloe curled on the carpet. "We received an anonymous tip," the officer announced in a steady, amplified voice, that illegal detention was taking place in this house. "Everyone will cooperate with the investigation." Anonymous tip. Harry Chun, the man who had sat in that northern warehouse for 2 years in front of 3 monitors, had pressed the alarm button the moment I started up those stairs. Samuel slowly raised his hands. The purple ligature marks on his wrists gleamed starkly in the torchlight. 2 officers blocked Leo on either side of the window frame. He slowly placed his phone on the sill and put his hands behind his back. Chloe sobbed on the carpet, the kind of broken, crumbling cry that comes when there's no need to hold it together anymore. The short-haired woman was handcuffed silently, only turning her face once to look at me. Her eyes were like a deep well, and I couldn't read what lay inside. I was led downstairs and sat on the living room sofa as the sky outside began to show a pale gray light. The coastline slowly emerged in the morning mist. The sea was like crumpled tinfoil, reflecting the thin dawn. Officers moved through the house, marking, photographing, sealing evidence. The older officer sat across from me, holding a cup of instant coffee he'd apparently scrounged from somewhere. "When you told me about the body on the beach and linked it to this house, I had people start watching all the beachfront properties in St. Ives. Your friend's tip came just in time. Half an hour later, and these people might have scattered." I took the coffee he offered. It was hot, the cup warming my palm to a faint tingle. Did the anonymous tipster leave contact information? The officer shook his head. The number was a disposable virtual one, couldn't trace it. But the tip was very precise. The address, the number of people involved, mention of an injury inside, signs of forced entry at a window. Whoever it was knew the inside of this house very well. "Harry." I repeated his name in my mind, then took a sip of coffee. Bitterness spread from my tongue down my throat, temporarily pushing back the exhaustion of a sleepless night. The officer opened his notebook. "We've recovered a laptop and a large number of paper documents from a bedroom on the 3rd floor. Initial assessment indicates significant irregular fund flows. In the next room, we also found some chemicals and packaging materials. They'll need further testing by specialists. The man who calls himself Leo is now our primary interview subject." "And my husband Samuel?" The officer looked at me. For a moment, something like hesitation flickered in those gray-blue eyes. He said he's willing to cooperate fully and asked to give a full statement immediately. The statement is already underway, in the study upstairs. He also specifically asked me to pass along a message. I gripped the paper cup. My palm was sweating. He said, the officer paused, that he fertilized the rose bush in your courtyard last week, and that this year it will bloom 2 weeks later than usual, so you shouldn't worry. What he promised you before, he still remembers. The cup crinkled in my grip. Scalding coffee spilled over the rim and burned my thumb. I let go, and the cup fell into my lap, brown liquid soaking into the fabric of my skirt. Outside, the morning light fully rose, the entire bay glittered with a golden sheen under the sun. The outline of that old plane tree on the opposite hillside grew clearer by the minute, its new leaves flipping in the wind like pale green waves. The officer stood up to attend to other matters. I was left alone on the sofa, the coffee stain on my skirt slowly spread into an irregular shape. Footsteps occasionally came up and down the stairway, accompanied by murmurs and the crackle of radios. I looked down at my palm. The warmth from Samuel's fingertips, when he returned the recorder, had faded quickly. The silver hard drive still lay in its hidden compartment in my bag, its password a combination of my birthday and Rose. He remembered all my small, trivial habits, yet had compressed a human life into a gray line of numbers in a ledger. Chloe was carried down on a stretcher, passing by me with a blanket over her face. Only half of her pale, gaunt profile was visible. Her lips moved, and I leaned in to catch the two words, "Thank you." The voice thin as a thread about to snap. I reached out and took her fingers. They were cold as if just taken from the sea. She squeezed back, very lightly but firmly, and then the stretcher was carried out, disappearing into the dawn light. Samuel came down around 10 in the morning, wearing a clean shirt, loose at the collar, one of the spare old ones kept at the holiday cottage. He stopped in the middle of the living room, across the coffee table from me. "I'll be inside for a long time," he said, his voice back to its usual steady tone, only lower. "I've already asked the company's legal department to contact a solicitor. As for the house, you can handle it however you like." The Land Rover in the garage was taken to Plymouth by Leo's people. The police said they'll recover it today. I nodded. He stood there for a few seconds, then turned and walked towards the door. At the threshold, he paused and said something over his shoulder, but the officer's radio drowned it out. I didn't catch it, and I didn't follow him to ask. The sea breeze rushed in through the open door, fresh and lightly salty with the morning chill. A bright rectangle of sunlight fell across the threshold and slowly crept toward my feet. Gulls called in the distance, a few long cries, as if someone far away were calling another person's name. I sat in that beam of light and placed the hard drive on the coffee table. Its casing was still warm from my body heat. I could feel the faint residual vibration of its components when I touched it. I placed the recorder next to it. The two small objects sat side by side, their metal surfaces reflecting the sea glow from the window. Later that morning, after the sun had fully risen, an officer came to collect the hard drive and the recorder as evidence, issuing me a receipt. I signed it and watched them being bagged and taken away. My palms felt empty, strangely light and disoriented. As I walked out of the White House, I looked back. The gauze curtain in the second-floor window still drifted in the wind, like a hand repeatedly reaching out but grasping nothing. In the small lawn outside the cottage, a few wild roses bloomed sparsely, their pink petals glistening with dew. I followed the slope toward the town, the sea breeze pushing me from behind, my steps lighter than when I had arrived. My phone buzzed, a text from Harry Chin. "All done on your end?" I replied, "Yes." After a pause, I added, "Thank you for calling the police." The reply came quickly, a photograph. It showed an open palm with a small, very old key resting in it. Beside it, written in marker on the tabletop, a line. "What Samuel left with me last week, now yours to keep. You know the password." I stared at that photo for a long time. The sea breeze tossed my hair across my face. I tucked it behind my ear, put the phone back in my pocket, and continued walking. The town's morning market had opened. The bakery wafted the scent of butter and toasted wheat, and an aproned shopkeeper was arranging freshly baked Cornish pasties on a shelf by the door. I bought one and held it in my hand, warm through the paper bag, the heat soaking into my palm. Then I sat down on a bench by the roadside, facing the bay, and ate slowly. Seagulls landed on the flagstones in front of me, tilting their heads, waiting for crumbs. When the sun had fully risen, the entire bay at St. Ives spread out in the light, layers of deep and shallow blue pushing in and receding, over and over, like a breath that would never stop. I finished the last bite of the pasty, brushed the crumbs from my hands, and stood up. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number, no name, just one line. The pest problem in the rose garden was dealt with last week. This year's bloom shouldn't be delayed too much. I stood in the morning sunlight, gripping the phone. A gust of wind swept the empty paper bag from my hand, carrying it a short way until it lodged in a crack between flagstones. I read that line over and over, then locked the screen, put the phone away, and turned toward the railway station. The tracks from the overnight train still lay quietly across the rolling hills. The daytime service wouldn't come until noon. I sat on the metal bench in the waiting room, watching the sea through the window, turning that last text over in my mind. Each word recognizable, yet I couldn't decide whether to read it as a farewell or as something else. From the end of the tracks, a train whistle sounded, growing closer, its rumble filling the small waiting room. I stood, zipped up my jacket, picked up my bag, and walked to the platform. As the train pulled in, a gust of air blew my hair across my face. I squinted, watched the doors open, and stepped inside. The seats faced each other in 2 rows. I chose a window seat. The morning train wasn't crowded. 2 rows away, an elderly couple shared a box of cherries, chatting softly and laughing occasionally. Outside, the view shifted from St. Ives coastline to rolling hills, vast expanses of grassland undulating in shades of green under the sun. I leaned against the window and closed my eyes. The exhaustion of the whole night finally swept over me. My eyelids felt as heavy as if they were soldered shut. My consciousness blurred for a few minutes before I startled awake, sat up straight in the seat, confirmed my bag was still on my lap, and saw that outside had turned to farmland and sparse woodland. The train stopped at a few small towns along the way, and more passengers boarded. The seat next to me was taken by a young mother holding a toddler of about 2, dressed in a blue-striped onesie, clutching a plastic duck. He turned to look at me, then reached out and offered the duck in my direction. "For you," his mother said with a smile. "He likes to share his toys with pretty aunties." I was caught off guard for a moment, then reached out and took the duck. It was plastic and made a clucking sound when squeezed. The little boy giggled when I made it squeak, then curled back into his mother's arms. As I returned the duck, my fingers brushed his tiny palm, warm, soft as freshly risen dough. The train continued. The sky outside gradually grew overcast. Clouds rolled in from the west, turning the morning light into a dim gray uniformity. I changed trains at some station for the tube into the city, arriving past noon. The street home was unchanged. The corner shop had new flower pots outside. The cafe next door had its awning half retracted, and 2 schoolboys in uniform squatted on the steps, sharing a bag of crisps. I walked along the pavement to the villa, pulled out the key, and paused as I inserted it into the lock. I had changed the locks yesterday. The new key's teeth still showed unmilled burrs in the light. I turned the key. The door opened. The foyer shoe cabinet, coat rack, the sofa cushions in the living room, the solidified candle on the coffee table. Everything was as I had left it, only covered in a fine film of dust from having left the windows open for ventilation. I changed into slippers, walked into the living room, and set my bag on the corner of the sofa. The curtains were still drawn as I had left them. The blackout layer filtered the afternoon light into a dim twilight, and the whole space was quiet as a box from which sound had been removed. I sat on the sofa. Beside me was that candle, its wax completely hardened, its cedarwood scent almost imperceptible. My gaze fell on something under the coffee table. A corner of the carpet was slightly lifted, as if something had caught it. I bent down, lifted the carpet edge, and found a folded note tucked underneath, its edges yellowed, creased from repeated opening and folding. I unfolded it. It was Samuel's handwriting, in blue-black ink, more rushed than usual, as if he'd been pressed for time. "Chinyu, if after changing the locks you still find this note, it means you're even more observant than I expected. I kept it under the coffee table, thinking one day while tidying you'd come across it. But now it seems it's just you discovering it." Below, the handwriting changed slightly, a bit more careful. "On our wedding day I was nervous, not because of the ceremony, but because I was afraid I didn't deserve you. In the 3 years since, I kept doing things that proved I didn't. Every time I came out of the study to have dinner with you, I felt like I was acting. But one thing was real. Every morning before you woke, when I stood in the kitchen making coffee, looking out at your roses in the courtyard, I felt grounded. That grounding wasn't fake. The last line was blurred by some water stain, but still legible. Whatever happens in the end, I want you to know, I chose you so many times. Even if I chose badly." I refolded the note and placed it back under the carpet edge. As I stood, my knee bumped the coffee table. sending a dull ache through the bone. I crouched down to rub it, and my eyes fell level with the potted spider plant that had been moved to the foyer. Chloe had given it to me for my birthday last year, saying it was a bargain from the market. It hadn't grown much in the months since, but its leaves stayed green. I picked it up and set it on the windowsill, pulling back the curtains to let the light in. The afternoon sky was now fully overcast. Thick gray clouds spread thickly. In the courtyard, the roses stood quiet in the dim light, their buds crowded tightly among the branches, none yet open. My phone chimed, a message from the bank confirming that the freeze on our accounts had been approved. Attached was a detailed statement of our joint account for the past 6 months. I scanned it quickly. Several entries marked household expenses, listed merchants I'd never heard of, amount small, tens to a few £100s, but frequent, averaging 2 or 3 times a week. I called the bank's customer service, gave them the transaction numbers, and requested the payee details. The agent came back after a moment saying the merchant was registered as Southwest Horticultural Services Ltd., whose business scope included landscape design, garden maintenance, and plant supply. The address was in Cornwall, about 20 miles from St. Ives. I hung up and stood at the window, staring out for a long time. The rose bush in the courtyard had indeed been carefully tended, as Samuel had said. The soil around the roots was freshly turned, with traces of fertilizer. I suddenly remembered that for the past 6 months or so, twice a month Samuel would say on a weekend morning that he had some errands to run, leave for 2 or 3 hours, and come back. I had never asked where he went.